We are back on the air once again, live, bringing you another Johnny Torch live broadcast, number 72. A special edition today. We are going to count down my top 20 favorite superhero films of all time. We're on the eve of Infinity War being released throughout the world, and unfortunately, I'm not going to be able to see it until Tuesday, I don't think, because tickets are just gone. If you didn't get them way in advance, I feel sorry for you. I could probably go to a real late midnight showing. I don't know if I'll be able to get to one of those. So the tickets I purchased for me and the family will be on Tuesday, meaning I ain't gonna be able to review it any earlier than that, probably Wednesday, as we usually do a Wednesday show at Torch News Roundup. But we get a special edition this Monday doing a topic that I've been wanting to do for a long time, which is my all-time favorite superhero films. Now, this is not just the MCU, and this is not the DCEU, which we have done both of them recently. Well, I don't want to say recently, what, about a year ago? And we'll probably be updating the MCU list before long. I did already update it on Twitter. If you want to search my Twitter feed, you might still find it. But let's not waste any more time because I'm sure this is going to be a long, long broadcast. Although I've already reviewed probably about 85% of these films in previous ranking lists. So I don't suppose I'll have that much more to say about them that you haven't heard already. So we'll try to keep it to about 10 minutes each film. Just briefly going over uh, the the good points, the salient points of each film. All right, let's start with number 20. And of course, I didn't want to do a top 10 because although the top 10 is the cream of the crop, I wanted to shout out to some of the lesser known, maybe more more suffice to say, less beloved films, because we did have uh, I don't want to say golden age, but really the golden age of superhero cinema in terms of when they first came out. Like, for instance, when we talk about the golden age of comics, we don't really mean the golden age of when they were at their height and at their best and the cream of the crop. We basically mean those were the early years when Superman came out, when Batman came out, then we had Captain America, Wonder Woman, and sort of that stuff. And when I say the golden age of superhero films, that basically means the ages of the 80s and 90s where not great, there wasn't an abundance of films, but a lot of the films that did come out then were great. And also, there's a sort of a silver age, too, when we had the pre-MCU days, when we had Blade and X-Men and Spider-Man, and a lot of films that also escape the notice of the great era of comic book films that we're in now. But again, I'm getting flowery here. Let's not waste any more time and get straight to the point. Here we go. Number 20 on my top 20 favorite superhero films of all time. And I also I'm gonna qualify this as my favorite superhero films. I mean, I'm sure there are qualifiers of comic book films. So these are superhero films. This is not something that was based on an existing comic. These have to be actual, honest to goodness superheroes. And the first one we'll put is number 20, Spider-Man 2. Spider-Man 2, a lot of people, of course, you can expect a lot of controversy in this list because I don't march to the same drum as everybody else when it comes to my choices. I'm always honest with you. I'm going to tell you the truth, the straight dope, the way I see it. I like Spider-Man 2, least favorite of the Spider-Man films from Sam Raimi, but it's still a great film by all means. This is, as you can see in the image there, all summed up by this image, we have the relationship between Spider-Man and Mary Jane, or I should say Peter Parker and Mary Jane, finally being at its high point here, where Mary Jane finds out Peter is Spider-Man. The soap opera elements were both done very well and a little took a lot of screen time away from Spider-Man, which is why I always put this one lowest on my list of Spider-Man favorites of the Raimi era, of course. I mean, this is by far and away better than the web films and the MCU film. But uh, Alfred Molina, of course, stealing the show as biased villains on screen. Again, I don't think they really portrayed him as accurate to the comic as they could have. They had him sort of as a, an unwilling dupe, and I don't know if I really see that in the Doc Ock character. I think he is just evil, and he has sort of a nobility about him where he's not a psychopathic killer. He's trying to do things basically, from his point of view for his own betterment, but not necessarily to harm people. So I think they did capture that fairly well, not making him like a black hat mad dog killer, but at the same time, that's kind of what puts it a little bit lower for me on the film. We have the emerging threat of Harry Osborn, which was so well brought out in this film with James Franco's Harry Osborn, his fall from grace happening basically overnight, which, was sad to see because Harry was a somewhat blasé, but, genuine friend to Peter, I think, in the original film. So there you have it, number 20, Spider-Man 2. And I gotta mention the song from this film, the train song, Ordinary, all-time favorite superhero soundtracks have to include Spider-Man 2. That's another one we should probably get to, the all-time greatest soundtracks in superhero history. Although, unfortunately, we don't have that anymore. And that's another thing that goes back to the Silver Age of superhero films, is we've got good soundtracks. They always hired great talent to give us good songs that would represent the movie. Um, you know, well, we're going to mention a lot of the films that are coming up had great soundtracks, and we'll talk about that while we're getting to it. But right now, Spider-Man 2, number 20. All right, next up on the list, as you might imagine, because you remember me saying in the Spider-Man ranking video that I did like Spider-Man 3 better than Spider-Man 2, it won't be a big surprise to find that our number 19 movie on this countdown is, in fact, Spider-Man 3. Didn't have a problem with this film as much as many people did. I liked the symbiote story. The costume looked great. The black suit Spider-Man. Some could say that Venom got a short shrift. I wouldn't argue with that, although I did like what they did with Eddie Brock in this film. He's sort of the dark opposite of Peter Parker. He's not just some, muscle-bound jock kind of Spider-Man, and has this insane obsession with him. This was more of a story that made sense in terms of what Venom's motivations were. He tried to take the easy way out of everything, Eddie, and he kept, doing everything opposite of the way Peter would do it. And so, obviously, when the time came that evil Spider-Man came across Eddie, it was like poetic that he became evil Spider-Man after all that had happened to him. And of course, you got the Sandman, who was also, I thought, a strong performance by Thomas Hayden Church. Some can argue it kind of took away from the rest of the movie. I mean, we could have devoted a little more time to Venom. I definitely would have liked to see more Black Suit Spider-Man in action, like I said in my review of this film for my Spider-Man rankings. We should have had that fight between Harry and Spidey in costume with Black Suit Spider-Man instead of him just wearing it under his costume. Like I said before, great performances in this film. I think this was the best acting of Kirsten Dunst. I think Tobey Maguire always gives a solid performance as Spider-Man. I thought this was, again, a little bit more fun for Spider-Man with some of the quips. The quips were not as plentiful in Spider-Man 2, and I think at least in this film we got some quippy Spider-Man, I'm the sheriff in these parts, and some of the quips he did here were much more memorable than the 2 or 3 that he did in Spider-Man 2. So again, a great film, and, kind of a misunderstood masterpiece. I wouldn't call it a masterpiece because, of course, some of the things about it were very annoying, like they retcon Uncle Ben's death. so that um, Sandman kills him accidentally. I didn't like that. That also puts it further down on the list. Otherwise, it probably would make it a little bit higher. But I still enjoy this one very much, and I don't see there being a 3-film curse on this one. I honestly think this was a great film. So there you have it, another controversial review on my part. Spider-Man 3 making number 19 on the list. Okay, next up we have, and this is another one that might be controversial, but I think this was a favorite of mine, particularly back in the day, as I said, when we didn't have a lot of great films in the 80s and 90s. This was honestly the best of the Batman films of that era, Batman Forever. That's number 18 on our list. This was the first film to show Batman and Robin together on screen, apart from, of course, the Adam West movie and television show. And I've been waiting for that. I was hoping Batman would have Robin in the first Batman movie, and then in the second film, in Batman Returns, there were rumors that they were going to have, I believe it was Damon Wayans. I don't know which of the Wayans brothers it was, because there's three, isn't there? I know there's Marlon and Damon, but is there another one? I don't remember. But anyway, I think he was supposed to get the part of Robin. He was going to be like a street mechanic. That strange would have been strange to see Michael Keaton and Damon Wayans. I mean, honestly, as Batman and Robin, you serious? Serious about that? But thankfully, cooler heads prevailed, and he was removed from that script as well until finally Batman Forever told the origin story of Dick Grayson, the best Robin, the Boy Wonder. And of course, Christopher, oh, I'm forgetting his name now, but oh man, my mind just went a blank. But Robin, the actor here, why does those things always happen to me on live broadcasts? Now I'll remember his name right afterwards. But he did a great job as Robin, the Boy Wonder here. Val Kilmer was serviceable as Bruce Wayne and pretty good as Batman. I missed Michael Keaton. I thought he was actually better in the role, a bit legitimately better. But unfortunately, his two films were not that good, in my opinion. Batman '89, while stylistically very strong, did not give the greatest Batman story, where you had the Joker killing Batman's parents, and you had more damningly, we had Batman killing, willy nilly. Unfortunately, in all the Batman films, more or less, you'll have Batman killing. It's something that you can't seem to avoid. Unlike like I said in the Batman reviews, the Batman film review video, Batman and Robin is actually the only film he doesn't kill anybody. In this film, it's more sort of a really sad way that they had Two-Face go out, where Batman sort of throws him by throwing coins up in the air. And, obviously that's not premeditated murder, but what did you think Two-Face was going to do? I mean, he's obsessed with the coin. You throw the coins up in the air, and you don't think he's going to be disoriented enough to try to grab them all. So basically, you had Batman kill again in this film. But like I said, it wasn't quite the wanton, destructive behavior that Batman was uh, showing in Batman '89 and Batman Returns. Nicole Kidman was very good. Like I said, sort of overdone Riddler by Jim Carrey, but Jim Carrey at the height of his powers. I mean, he did good, but they kind of overplayed the manic humor and craziness. It would have been nice to have one foot a little more into the sane realm of playing it straight. But and of course, Two-Face, not exactly the Two-Face we wanted to see with the gravitas of, say, Batman the animated series. But it was a fun Two-Face. Like I said in my other review, they did some interesting things with him, with the costuming, with the pair of girls. it was an interesting take on the character, not something that I would want to see again, but it was a product of its time that kind of worked in that element. And of course, as I said before, the soundtrack. This film had a killer soundtrack. We had Seal with "Kiss from a Rose," one of the all-time great songs. We got "Hold Me, Thrill Me, Kill Me, Kiss Me," or something of that nature. I probably got it out of order, but of course, a great soundtrack. U2 uh, attributing some songs here to the movie. So yeah, there we have the origin of Robin the Boy Wonder, something that probably won't be seen again. They're going to have a Nightwing movie, and maybe they'll give us a flashback. I probably wouldn't put money on it, but this might be the only time you'll ever see the circus origin of Robin, Dick Grayson. And it was done very, very well. So again, another reason why Batman Forever makes the list. And of course, one of my all-time favorite lines from any superhero movie: "If you kill him, he won't learn nothing." So, it was a lot of fun. And that's pretty much what I wanted in a Batman film that we didn't get all through the 80s. It had like a neon tone to it, which was something else that was new, because the sort of grimy, gritty, real world feel of the first movie, which I really didn't feel was real world. It did feel like sort of like a sort of a it felt very stagey, very stagey. That's not to say the other films didn't, but it didn't really feel as real world as it should have. And then the second one, of course, was sort of like a Burton fever dream. And then this one, of course, we have sort of the crazy skyscrapers and the neon colors. It was a very 90s feel. Again, kind of a period piece, but the way we did things back then sort of excuses it from some of its foibles. But Batman Forever, it makes number 18 on my list. All right, we're moving along pretty quickly here at a pretty rapid clip. We might get this one banged out in an hour, surprisingly, although I doubt it. All right, this one now we've gone into the distant past there, so to speak, with a couple of these films. This is a much more recent film. We have number 17, X-Men. I'm having trouble today speaking. X-Men: Days of Future Past. This is one of the great films on the list. We have a couple of X-Men films. This, I think, was the best of the modern X-Men films, the ones with the new cast. We have the new cast meeting the old cast here, and it works really well. This was sort of the swan song of the original cast. They brought back Patrick Stewart, Sir Ian McKellen, Halle Berry, some brief roles there for to bring back James Marsden and Kelsey Grammer, but mostly for the most part, this is the current cast of the X-Men: James McAvoy, Michael Fassbender, Jennifer Lawrence, and it was a great melding of the two with Hugh Jackman at center stage. But of course, he doesn't dominate the proceedings. He doesn't dominate the storyline. He's the important connective tissue between the two. And we have a great performance here by James McAvoy. Honestly, I thought he should have gotten the Academy Award for Best Actor for this film, because we do see a very despondent Charles Xavier in this one. He's given up. He's despairing. But he manages to pull himself out of it with the help of Wolverine and basically the love of his students, the love of Mystique. And that's one of the things that I love about this film is this is still, of course, when Jennifer Lawrence wasn't mailing it in, and she's really giving her all as Mystique. And she looks great as Mystique, still, in her natural blue form for most of the important parts of the film. She's in hiding, of course, so you can explain away some of her not being in her natural state. We also have, of course, Hank Henry McCoy having a great role in this film, where he's kind of questioning whether he should be in disguise or not. He's sort of keeping his powers you know, on the down low. And it really fits in well with X-Men 3 The Last Stand, which isn't the film that I don't dislike. A lot of people dislike it a lot. I mean, it's a weaker film in the pantheon here, but it was still pretty good, and it pretty much felt like the Kelsey Grammer beast when he was young. I think that was one of the great unsung things that they managed to capture in this film. Uh, Again, as I said, the friendship between Charles and Eric in the future, or present, if you want to consider the Stuart McKellen uh, pairing there, the present day Charles and Eric, just wonderful to see them again, and their rapport is just so great. And Eric says, all those years wasted fighting each other. They can see the big picture after the fact. Unfortunately, this doesn't really give a lot of context to X-Men 3. They don't explain away some of the things, although we did see at the end of X3 that Charles' brain would still be um you know active in the body of another, his twin brother, although that twin brother probably shouldn't be paralyzed like Charles still is. They'd have to explain that away, but heaven knows they don't. um Wolverine has the adamantium claws again, another story we don't hear because, of course, the adamantium was stripped away from his claws in the Wolverine. So again, we don't get a very big picture of what happened in between these movies, and they go out of their way not to tell us. But as I said, coming back to the focal point of this film, it's the battle for the soul of one woman. It's the battle for the soul of Mystique, and I thought that was one of the great, underlying stories of any of the X-Men films, was that battle that Charles had to try to win her back. Eric really isn't even being able to influence her the way he once did. It's a great film, and one of the all-time greats. And of course, we have the introduction of Quicksilver. That was, you know, one of the highlights of the film as well. So number 17, X-Men Days of Future Past. And that is, of course, one of the all-time great films. All right, next up we have number 16 on the list. Number 16, we have another film not too distant in the past. We have Wonder Woman. Wonder Woman, yeah, this was Patty Jenkins' Wonder Woman, Gal Gadot's, uh, well, not her first go at the character, but her first solo film as Wonder Woman. And again, this is a great film. This is Wonder Woman pretty much perfectly realized the way you wanted Wonder Woman realized in the big screen treatment. And Gal Gadot has just done a great job with this character. She's done great in this role, and she really made it her own in this film because she had the presence in Batman v Superman, her introduction, but she's more an enigma there. We don't really understand, what her motivations are, what she's up to, and what she's doing. This we get her whole story, and it's very, lovingly told. You can tell that Patty Jenkins not only appreciated the character, but did take inspiration from Donner's Superman, try to give us the same kind of feel of the hopeful superhero, the historical context, the World War One setting, and it was all very well done as well. Chris Pine, of course, gives a tremendous performance here. He doesn't outshine Wonder Woman, but he is very much a force, a factor in this film. The villains, probably not the most strongest suit here, brings it down maybe a little bit. But yeah, Wonder Woman, this was uh, a very enjoyable film. And I would say that had it not been for a couple of other films that I like just a little bit more, this probably would have made it higher up on the list. But yeah, number 16. I knew I was going to make a mistake. But no, this is number 16, Wonder Woman. And we carry on here now with number 15. We go back into the X universe for X-Men. This is X-Men 1, the first film. And I didn't know whether to put this one above Days of Future Past or not, but this is really the one that started it all. And there's a very strong sense of the animated series that we all loved from Fox Kids. This really, out of all the films, feels the most like that series brought to life. This is the only series that, I mean, this is the only film in the series that doesn't really marginalize Cyclops. Cyclops is still a lead character. He gets kicked to the curb in basically every other movie after this, but he feels like a decent presence here. Again, we get probably the best. The focus on Rogue was probably the best here of any of the films she was in. Hugh Jackman came and blew us all away. I mean, just look at him. Look at the guy. He's Wolverine. And this, of course, at the very beginning of his career and his career as Logan, which he would go on to play so well. Even in the lesser films, I have to say that he still gave 100%. The same as, Christopher Reeve and all the other great actors that we have in superhero films didn't always get to play in great movies, but he still gave 110%. So hats off to Hugh Jackman. Also, of course, we have, the pitch perfect casting of Patrick Stewart. Everybody, when they heard he was going to be playing Professor X, just thought, that's it. Don't look at any other actors. Just get Patrick Stewart on payroll, because he is perfect for that role. And he was. And he also gave a performance that was electric. We also had, of course, Ian McKellen, a great actor that really honestly wasn't taken seriously back then. We all think of him as a great actor now, but back then he was doing stuff like supporting roles in The Shadow and Last Action Hero. Now we remember him as Magneto and, of course, a great Shakespearean actor, but back then he wasn't really given his due, in Hollywood anyway. Blew us all away here as Magneto. As I said, it was very much keeping to the animated series feel. We had the triangle between Cyclops, Jean, and Logan here. Very well realized. Sabretooth, probably at his best, even though they took pains to try to do something with him in Origins. I think this was pretty much the best representation we got of Sabretooth. They never really paid off this storyline, but unfortunately, it was left in the lurch, and they could have done something with him in Logan, which you're not going to see Logan on the list. I didn't like it that much, and not a complete slap at that film like it was horrible, but it just didn't pay off really any of the characters really as much as I would like to have seen. But anyhow, number 15 on the list, X-Men, the original movie. All right, next up we have number 14 on the list, and this is probably a much lower ranking than a lot of people would put this film. It's a respectable number to me, 14, because there was a lot of great films above this. But The Dark Knight. The Dark Knight, and again, a lot of positions on this list could change at a moment's notice, because I compiled this list over a couple of weeks, and I don't know, the top 10 is pretty much set in stone. These films, I don't know, like for instance, I didn't know where to place Iron Man. Unfortunately, Iron Man didn't make the cut. I could see myself maybe putting Iron Man above this film, but then again, this film probably deserves to be even higher than I have it here at number 14. But anyway, to just go briefly over it, as you all know, it's a great film. A great performance by Heath Ledger. As I said before, probably not my definitive Joker, but he was fun. He was funny. I liked a little bit more of the sort of playful jester Joker that will use the electric joy buzzers and the squirting flowers of acid and stuff. But we still had a lot of fun with the Joker, with the over the top persona, the sort of force of nature that he was here, and of course, take nothing away from Christian Bale, who is still my favorite Batman actor. I think he played it perfectly, and Aaron Eckhart, again, one of the great performances, an actor that is very underrated. We haven't seen him do a whole lot since this movie, but he's a great actor. He did a lot here that was great. Um, Maggie Gyllenhaal came in to replace Katie Holmes, which she did a great job. Another great performance by Michael Caine and Morgan Freeman. Just very strong showing all around. The action was superb. Oh, that's one of the greatest car chases you're ever going to see probably in your lifetime. That's one of my favorite scenes of the film, the Joker trying to take out the Harvey Dent. Just great. And then, of course, the ending with the confrontation up there on the building. That's pure Batman and Joker. This was, honest to goodness, the best representation I've seen of the Batman and Joker rivalry. It's just like two forces of nature, as they say, the immovable object versus the unstoppable force. And that's what we had in this film. And it's just great. It takes my breath away every time I see it. Like I said, I think it's a little complex. I think they could have whittled it down a little bit to make it a little bit more digestible. But, for the most part, it is an experience. And it's an experience that never gets old. Even though, like I said, my main criticism of the film is probably if it doesn't feel comic booky enough. I don't like, things like the Joker with the smeared on makeup and some of the more, police procedural stuff that's in it. That kind of turns me off. And that's why it's probably a little bit lower than it would be on most people's film lists. But again, it's a great film, and take nothing away from it. Chris Nolan, of course, hit this one out of the park. Number 14, The Dark Knight, on Johnny's all-time superhero list. Okay, number 13 coming up, again, an unconventional pick. This is probably going to be controversial, but I enjoy the heck out of this film, and I don't care if anybody disagrees. We have the original Tim Story Fantastic Four. I felt that this film very much nailed the characters. The one big drawback was Doctor Doom, and it's not really the actor's fault. Again, I can't remember his name. He might have pulled it off pretty well, but they Norman Osbornized him. They Norman Osbornized Victor Von Doom, where he's now a, CEO, megalomaniac. That was what was off-putting to this film. But they pretty much got the characters all right. Jessica Alba, probably not going to be the first choice of anybody to play the Invisible Woman, but she did very well. And she played a Sue Storm that I could support. They tried to make her look like the character because obviously this was back when, picking unconventional choices they would still try to make you look like the character. So they made her wear, blue contact lenses that, at least in the first film, were, passable. In the second film, they looked very odd and unusual. And the same thing, in the second film, they gave her this unkempt wig that was very unbecoming for the most part. In the first film, though, she still looked good as Sue Storm. Ian Griffith, I believe that's how you pronounce his name. Again, a great Reed Richards. That's pretty much what I expected from Reed Richards. I think they only improved on his character in the second film. Second film doesn't make the list because as much as it was fun like this one, some stuff like Galactus the Cloud being disappointing, same as Doctor Doom. When you have two villains that are disappointing in a film, that, really pushes it down the list. But that film wasn't bad as either. I mean, the Silver Surfer was pretty good in that film. About the best realizations I could think of the Silver Surfer. And we got Michael Chiklis as Ben Grimm. That, great performance there. He played the Ben Grimm of my childhood, reading the comics. One of my favorite characters, always the ever-loving blue-eyed thing. And Michael Chiklis just portrayed that sort of, man, the heart of a man in the shell of a monster. He portrayed that perfectly. And, there's the scenes of him, mostly in the second film where he lightens up a bit and is more, okay with his place in the world. That's more for the second film. But, they managed to convey the pathos of the character here. And of course, Chris Evans, long before he was Steve Rogers, he was Johnny Storm. And of course, he was perfect. This was perfect for him, this part, because he got to be the jocular, you know, sort of arrogant, lovable jerk, and he played that to the hilt. In any other hands, this performance would have just fallen flat. That would have been, you wouldn't be able to stand watching Johnny Storm if he was played like that by any other actor, but he made it endearing. He made it endearing, Chris Evans. And so, yeah, again, not a perfect film, but when you're talking about the Fantastic Four, it is terribly hard to try to get, you know, these characters right for some reason. Fan Forstic was awful. You can't really complain about the Corman film because it wasn't really intended to be widely released, but for some reason it's been difficult to get these characters on screen. And if all we ever had was these characters, these actors portraying these characters, I would have been happy that I got a Fantastic Four film in my lifetime. MCU will probably take their shot at these characters again. I'm not going to hold my breath that it's going to be any better than this film because the way they pretty much mismanaged Spider-Man in the MCU, I don't think that it's going to be a, a much better off presentation when they do Fantastic Four. Sorry, that's what I think. All right, so number 13, Fantastic Four. All right, next up we have number 12 in the countdown. And this, of course, is a much more recent film and another controversial pick, which I'm sure everybody is going to have an opinion on. But Justice League. Oh, yes, this made its way up the list pretty quickly for me. Justice League, I thought it was a great film. The weak link might be the fact the Flash is just a little too goofy. But you got Ben Affleck doing a great job as Batman Bruce Wayne. Gal Gadot already proved herself in Wonder Woman. She carries it off here perfectly. Jason Momoa, the breakout star of this film, I think he just broke out and made me want to see Aquaman yesterday. He really brought something to the character that I think a lot of people were, what's Aquaman going to do in this? What is he going to be? But, he's a captivating character. Ray Fisher, the guy has the most soothing voice. The guy has the most soothing voice imaginable. I could just listen to that guy read the telephone book every night, and that would just put me to sleep because he's just got the greatest soothing voice to take the edge off a hard day. But no kidding, all kidding aside, but he did a great job here with Cyborg, and he made me interested in the character. I mean, when everybody heard, oh, they're going to make a Cyborg movie, yeah, all right, yeah, I'll see that one when it comes on cable. But honestly, I would see it. I would see it opening week. I'm interested now in Cyborg because, he's convinced me. He made a believer out of me, Ray Fisher, with this character. He's, everything that you expect Cyborg to be. He's not really the life of the party, but you got to remember at this point in the story, he's just coming to grips with being a, 75% machine. And, he's not going to be the life of the party with that situation having just befalled him. Superman, of course, Henry Cavill, the first time he actually gets to act like Superman, because, of course, most of Zack Snyder's footage of Henry Cavill is jettisoned, thankfully. And Joss Whedon, of course, props to him for what he did to save this film, because I'm sure it would have been much worse had it, not gone under his reconstruction. Not a bad film by any means. There's some things that still bug me. Batman is still seen using a gun on the parademons. Steppenwolf, I thought, was all right. It would have been a much more difficult prospect had Darkseid been the villain. But seeing as how all you really needed was Superman, and he could take care of Steppenwolf, and that's basically all I want to see is Superman taking care of business against a heavy hitter like Steppenwolf. Like I said, the humor was there where the previous two films in the DCU were dark and dour, the previous two Snyder films. And so the humor was there, the action was there, and the feeling of just seeing them all together for the first time on the big screen was there. I loved it, and I still love it. I don't care what anybody thinks. Justice League is number 12 on my list. Okay, next up, we have number 11. And this is, of course, a major victory here for the MCU. We have Captain America Civil War. Let me center this a little bit. How are they going to be able to see all these heroes in this panoramic view? Who the heck put Black Panther way in the back there like that? That's a crime. But anyway, yeah, so we've got Captain America Civil War is number 11. And this is, this one really just blew us all away. It was a heartbreaker, really, at the end of this to see, Cap and Tony going at it. And the fact that Bucky is such a helpless, figurehead here of this. He's the figurehead of this whole problem that's been going on with the Sokovia Accords. That's the catalyst that sets Captain America off against, his beloved country because he wants to protect Bucky because he knows Bucky isn't doing it of his own accord. And then you have, of course, Tony's parents being killed. It's just I don't want to sound flowery again, but it's a Greek tragedy. I mean, it's just, the best of friends becoming the worst of enemies over the two friends that, Cap and Bucky are. Cap is not going to forsake Bucky, knowing that it's not really his fault. But then again, you can't help but feel for Tony because he does want to avenge his parents' death. And, Bucky is the cause of it. And of course, you've got the great introduction to the MCU of Spider-Man, one of the great introductions before they ruined him in Spider-Man Homecoming. And then you have Black Panther introduced remarkably as well. Great performance here by Scarlett Johansson as well. I think she was a standout player in this film. Doesn't get enough credit, I don't think, in this film. But all the others, Paul Rudd as Ant-Man. You've got Elizabeth Olsen as Scarlet Witch, just perfect. Paul Bettany as the Vision. Jeremy Renner as Hawkeye. Once again, he steals every show he's in. Jeremy Renner. And just a great performance here all around by the cast. Civil War, yeah, wish there was enough to push this one way into the top 10, but it just fell out. So number 11 of my all-time favorites list, Civil War. All right, next up we have number 10. We're getting into the top 10 now. What do you guys think is going to be in my top 10 list of all-time favorites? Take a breath, take a breather. I'll take a sip of water. And we will see. This one is going to surprise many people. Again, it's an unconventional choice that a lot of people would probably not have on their top 10 favorites, but I do. Daredevil by Ben Affleck. The Ben Affleck Daredevil. What's his name? Mark Steven. He directed this. I don't know. He directed Ghost Rider too, which the first Ghost Rider also is a good movie, I would say, although it didn't make the cut here, of course. There's only so many spots we could do. But Ben Affleck, I thought, really kicked butt as Daredevil. He looks great in the costume. I think he arguably looks better in the costume than Charlie Cox. Again, take nothing away from Cox, but I just kind of feel like he's got the stature more of Daredevil here with the more leathery looking suit. And, he plays Matt Murdock very well here as well. And the story is great. You've got the tragedy of Elektra, much more better represented here than in season 2 of the Netflix show. I am talking about the theatrical release as well here. I am not talking about the director's cut. I don't believe I've ever seen the director's cut. There was a version of it on TV that was called the director's cut. I should try to find it in stores because I know they did have it like in the bargain bins for the longest time. And I was like, yeah, maybe someday I'll get it. But I'm not that interested in it because from what I've seen of the director's cut, it doesn't impress me. I don't like the added stuff. It's just more stuff of, the mystery about the Kingpin and trying to tie him in and this and that. Now, you don't get that in this film, the theatrical cut. It's just, well, the word is out on the Kingpin and he gets arrested or what have you. And there's no real, reason for it, but it's a much better movie streamlined than having them go through this, pretty needless exercise in trying to prove the Kingpin's guilt. One thing I didn't like about the film was Matt Murdock giving up fighting crime in order to be with Elektra for the cheesy love scene. Didn't need that in the movie, and it just made Daredevil look bad. And I always say you don't make the hero look bad. They did do something here with the hero killing villains. In the beginning, he kills the rapist, which another one of those things where, well, he didn't push him onto the train tracks. He just made a move when the guy pulled a gun on him, and he falls and breaks his back, and well, he didn't have to save him, did he? But you have something here that you didn't have in the Batman films, in the Michael Keaton Batman films. You have a story arc for the character. He's a very cold, callous person in the beginning of the film, but he finds salvation through Elektra, and seeing what Elektra's going through and how she wants revenge, it turns his whole outlook on life on its head, and he sees that he can't be the bad guy. That's one of the things that is such a great moment in this film, when he beats up one of the Kingpin's enforcers, and he notices that the kid, that the son of the guy that he's beating up, who's just an 8-year-old kid or something, is like cowering in the corner. And he says, well, I'm not the bad guy, kid. He's trying to do the right thing, but he's not going about it in a way that's very heroic, that's very noble, that's a inspiration to anybody. And he finds his way through Elektra in a backhanded way, I suppose, but he finds his way, and this changes his outlook for the better at the end of the movie. And Jennifer Garner is great as Elektra. I thought she was perfect. The film Elektra also gets a bit of a bad rap. I personally think it's not that bad. It's not, it's not going to make the top 10 or top 20 or maybe even top, 50 of any list. But I think if you cut out like the first 20 minutes of that movie, which is, boring as all get out, it's a decent film. So I would have preferred that they would have gone ahead with this universe's Daredevil and so forth. Karen Page in this film, played by Ellen Pompeo. Is that how you pronounce her name? From Grey's Anatomy. We could have done a lot with her. She has a cameo in this film. She looked great as Karen. She looked just like Karen from the comics, and they could have spun this into a great trilogy. And of course, Ben Affleck opted not to want to come back, I think, is what was the impetus of this. Possibly they had the choice to bring him back under contract, but he was very vocally unhappy with playing Daredevil. I don't know why. I guess it's the cumbersomeness of the costume and stuff. And that's why it was difficult to see him coming into the role of Batman, because I knew there was going to be a time limit on him, because not only because he's a little bit older now, he's in his 40s, and, jumping around the costumes is not something that he's going to be wanting to do for another 10 years. And you can't get away with it like, say, Robert Downey Jr. with the Iron Man costume, where they just put a couple of sticky balls on his costume, on his black leotard, and CGI the rest of it. With Batman, it's a little bit different. You've got to kind of have that suit on, practically. But he didn't really want to come back. That kind of was what pushed this, on the back burners until they pretty much scrapped plans. But this was a big moneymaker for them at the time. It was the biggest moneymaker in February, before Black Panther took that title. And, of course, we also have, I don't want to forget the villains in this film, Michael Clark Duncan. He was perfect as the Kingpin. Now, this is coming from someone who honestly complains every time a character's race changed. Even someone as minor as Alicia Masters in Fantastic Four. I don't know why they cast a black woman to play Alicia, because the thing in the comics was Alicia was supposed to look like Sue, because Ben originally had a kind of a crush on Sue, and then he kind of like got his own Sue in Alicia. And of course she wasn't a dead ringer, but that was part of the original story in the comics, was that she was a dead ringer. But I mean, they didn't have to go that route, but it was a very strange choice, I thought. But in this case, going back to Michael Clark Duncan, he honestly looked, felt, sounded like, and acted like Wilson Fisk, with the only major difference being his skin tone. Honestly, I had no problem with him playing Kingpin. And if you can get that close to the character without changing anything, like for instance, in Fan Four Stick, you had to make them step siblings, the Storms, because of course Johnnie is black and Sue is white. You change the whole balance of the film with that choice. Here, it really wasn't anything that ruined anything. I mean, he had a son in the comics, Rose, I believe, the Rose and Thorn storyline. I can't remember. I haven't read that one in a long time, but um, you know, and that probably could have been also handled with a black actor, and it wouldn't have really changed anything if they did that storyline. So, it was a great performance by the unfortunately late Michael Clark Duncan. Um, Also, Colin, what's his name? I can't remember his name right now. Um, yeah, he played Bullseye. I can't remember his name right now either. I'm blanking on his name, but still, yeah, that's what happens when you don't write these things down and put all the facts right before you. You embarrass yourself. But still, everybody knows what I'm talking about. He did a great job here. Disappointed that he wasn't in costume for this film. Yeah, they tried to do something with the bullseye on his forehead as a brand or something, and his big creepy cape, but or coat that he used like a cape. But I appreciated him as Bullseye, the craziness he brought to it, the outrage he had at missing. I loved that. I love when you give, especially a villain, the one foible that is going to be his downfall. He cannot abide by the fact that he missed. And it's like his one weakness. It's the one kryptonite that's going to bring him down because he can't get away from that. He can't get around that he missed. And the Daredevil made him miss, and he's going to get the Daredevil. It's kind of the same thing like, with Captain Hook and the Croc. It's like, that's his one weakness. He's going after Peter Pan because he cut off his hand, but the Croc is going to keep coming, and he's going to keep, running from the Croc. And it's sort of the same thing here, I think, in a sense, where he's got his pride, basically like the Croc, that's going to edge him on to keep him moving forward to, go after Daredevil. Yeah, it was an interesting concept that they did here. By trying to fold so many things in, and for me, it worked. Also, so many things in this film. Joey Pants, he was great as Ben Urich. I just loved his performance. He's a little more suave than the comic version of Ben Urich. They never got the comic version of Ben Urich right, even in the Netflix film. But I thought this one was a little more closer to being just this sort of, guy that, basically he's, just some, low level guy, like blue collar worker. You know what I mean? He's not really this Pulitzer Prize winning journalist. And you also have the great soundtrack, as I said. I love that scene. One of my favorite scenes in the film is the music from Evanescence. When they put that actually in the movie where Elektra's training, and you see Elektra going all out to get ready to take on the Daredevil because she thinks the Daredevil killed her father. Another one of those great Stan Lee Greek tragedy type setups. She's going to go after the man that killed her father. She doesn't know it's the man she loves. And you can see in her face at the end of that scene, after she's trained and the music is dying down, that she looks in the mirror and she knows she's not ready for this. And we know it too. And it's just heartbreaking to see what happens to her at the hands of Bullseye. He just toys with her. And it's very much like in the comics. I mean, he just has his way with her, and she never stood a chance. And again, it's a great tragedy. Daredevil's there to witness this, and he can't compose himself enough at the time. And you get the great story of the, masks and hiding behind masks, and the priest, basically Matt's Catholicism also on display, something that I appreciated very much. Just a great film. I could go on and on, but I think we probably took more time on this film than many of the others because we haven't talked about this one very much. But yeah, definitely Daredevil, number 10 on my list. Check it out. I can't bring myself to put this one lower than 10. because it was much higher until, like I said, other great movies kind of pushed it down. But I still am going to keep this at number 10. This is one of my favorite superhero films of all time. All right, coming up next, we have number 9. Number 9. This is another one from that time period, especially from that year. This came out the same year. X2, X-Men United. Much like Daredevil, when I got this puppy on DVD, I wore out certain scenes. The action scenes are phenomenal. Just great. I loved seeing Nightcrawler realized for the first time in live action. Great performance by Alan Cummings. Just the great, religious background of the character. We didn't get a whole lot of that in X-Men Apocalypse with the new version of Nightcrawler. I hope they go back to that. This is when we were still trying to be reasonably faithful to the comics, and Nightcrawler was portrayed as a very devout Christian, which is something that I appreciated a lot. We've got Lady Deathstrike here in the lovely Kelly Hu, which she was so great in that role with the with the adamantium nails. She was so great, and she had a great look about her too, with the sort of the adamantium in the eyes or whatever it was. No, that was the drug. That was the drug that made her eyes look like that. But yeah, just that great action scene. Cyclops is kicked to the curb, very disappointing. But we had Wolverine taking the young mutants, which is something that I liked, under his wing in this film. Rogue, Iceman, and Pyro. Pyro just phenomenal in this film. I really wish that kid could have done more with this role because he didn't get enough time. He got a good portion of X3 though. That was great. He got to have that final showdown with Iceman. But when you see Magneto twisting him around his finger, and he tells him, what can you do? And he tells him about his powers, and he says, what's your name? He says, John. He says, what's your real name, John? I still love that. That's a great scene where you get to see a master manipulator trying to get him to his side. He says, you're a god among insects, and don't let anyone tell you different. And from then on, Pyro is pretty much a Brotherhood member. And it's just a great, scene of that manipulation. One thing I always comment on in this film, you have Brian Cox doing a spectacular job here as one of my favorite villains. If you look at my all-time top 10 favorite villains list, you'll see he made it in the top 10 because Colonel Stryker, just a great villain, a very Khan-like villain where you can see his suffering and where he came from, but it's not, reasonable the lengths he'll go through or he'll go to try to avenge what he feels has wronged him. And Professor X, Charles Xavier here, we have another stellar performance by Patrick Stewart, who really, he has a great role here where, his scenes with Cox are amazing. And, the Proteus type dealing with his son, it's great. It's just a great film. And you have, of course, the emergence of the Phoenix in this film, Jean Grey. Like I said, Cyclops doesn't get a lot to do, but at least he gets a pivotal scene at the end there when Jean is dying, or where Jean dies, basically, or, for all intents and purposes, she dies. And he sort of loses it, and it's him and Logan both losing it at the same time in a very different way. Scott is not used to loss. He's the good soldier. He brings everybody home every time. And Logan knows his share of loss. He already knows what it's like to lose. And he takes it in a much different way. He takes it more in stride. And it's just a heartbreaking scene. I just love the way they play that together, those two guys. And like I said, if there's only one flaw in this film, it's that Cyclops could have gotten a much bigger part in the film, a bigger presence in the film. And I honestly wish that they would have given him that presence. Okay, so we are on number 9 there. Number 8, we have Thor, the original Thor, yes, another MCU film here. This was a great film. As I said in my other ranking video for the MCU, I just love the Shakespearean tones of this. You have basically the crux of the story, you have a king who has a stubborn, unruly son who is not ready for the throne, and he's caught between him and his adopted, treacherous, damaged son who wants the throne and to prove himself. And Odin's caught in between this, and then, of course, you have Thor having to learn and to become worthy. You have Loki descending into, he was just a mischievous character at first, but he becomes malevolent by the end of the film. And the comedy relief there, the Earth scenes. A lot of people, put this film lower on their list because some of those scenes are a little bit more broad than what people wanted, I suppose. But they're also very successful. They get the point across what they're trying to do. I think the Earth scenes of The Dark World, by comparison, I would say, don't work as well, but they work well here. And some great action. That final battle with Loki and Thor, that's one of the great action climaxes in a Marvel film, an MCU film. The destruction of the Rainbow Bridge, Odin coming to the rescue at the end. Just a great film, and it's definitely number 8 on my all-time list. Okay, next up, we've got number 7. Again, this is another MCU film that shouldn't surprise you. We've talked about it many times in the past. Captain America, the First Avenger. Again, just a perfect introduction to the character. The CGI, of course, was perfect. The Skinny Steve stuff. We've got Hugo Weaving as the Red Skull. Pitch perfect performance. Great supporting cast here with Sebastian Stan as Bucky. The introduction to him was perfect. Haley Atwell, of course, just a heartbreaker as Agent Carter. And, even, the aforementioned, I'm forgetting his name too now, but great performances all around. You've got Chris Evans, just embodying the character of Steve Rogers and Captain America so brilliantly, so wonderfully. It's just, the period is perfect. It's a period piece that is just second to none. And, I can't see how they could ever top this as a Captain America film. A lot of people liked Winter Soldier better. Winter Soldier, again, controversial pick, didn't make my top 20. Civil War ranks up there high, but no, this is, I think, the greatest Captain America film. It captures him in his milieu, and it's really the one to beat. It's the head of the class. Like I said before in my other review about this film, I think maybe they could have been a little bit more dialogue between Captain America and Red Skull. That's something they probably should have done in one of the sequels that they unfortunately didn't do here because they didn't have another chance after this. But apart from that, it's a pretty flawless movie for Captain America. So that's where we have for our number 7, Captain America, the First Avenger. All right, next up we have number 6. Number 6 on this list. Let's see here. What do we have? Another MCU film. We have The Avengers. Oh, yes, The Avengers right there. And let's not cut out Black Widow. There she is. Ain't she pretty? All right, so, yeah, the original Avengers. It's just, what can I say that hasn't been said about it a million times before? It's the one that started it all, that proved it could work. We got all the heroes together. Everybody gets the same amount of screen time. Maybe not Jeremy Renner's Hawkeye, but notwithstanding, everybody's perfectly in character. They didn't muss it up. They didn't make any stupid mistakes. Tom Hiddleston's Loki steals the show. I would say Scarlett Johansson's Black Widow is the MVP. This is the film that made me fall in love with the character, wanted to see her in her own movie. She was perfect in Iron Man 2, but didn't really have quite the presence that she had here. Again, Captain America, perfect. We had Tony Stark, but with Robert Downey Jr., perfect. The introduction of Mark Ruffalo's Bruce Banner, also very well done. Probably the best job he's done as the Hulk in the MCU thus far. Also, we have to tip our hat as well to Clark Gregg. Agent Coulson, unfortunately, left the MCU, or at least will have left the MCU on the big screen until Captain Marvel comes out. But unfortunately, he is killed in this one. And a very powerful scene. Everybody came to love that character so much. And it was heartbreaking when he actually perished at the hands of Loki. But of course, he came back as a star in Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., which, if you haven't seen the show lately, tune in and watch it. I'm telling you, it's going to blow your mind. It's been great this season. That last episode, you can see on one of the previous videos of This Week in Comic Book Television, was stellar. All right, so of course we also had Nick Fury. This was probably his greatest. No, well, I don't know. I think his performance in Winter Soldier might have topped this. But again, a great performance by Samuel L. Jackson. We kind of forget him a little bit, but I think yeah, probably second only to Winter Soldier. This was a great performance from him. Maria Hill, Be Still My Heart. Kobe Smulders did a great job here with Maria Hill, giving her a little bit of an action scene at the beginning. That was a lot of fun. And so, yeah, number 6, The Avengers. All right, now we're at top 5. Top 5. What's it going to be, people? What do you think? Who is going to be in the top 5? What film is going to take the number 1 spot? Let's see. Number 5, my all-time favorite superhero list. In the number 5 spot, we've got my all-time favorite superhero, the Incredible Hulk. Yes, the Incredible Hulk. Edward Norton. Again, a film that is not really getting the credit it deserves. It doesn't get its due, but it's a great film. Another great action finale between the Hulk and Abomination. Let me just get that out of the way. If you've read any of the comics of the 70s, Herb Trimpe's run, as the artist of the Hulk, his throwdowns with Abomination were stuff of legend. This film captures that perfectly. Of course, one of the problems being that the Abomination didn't look like the Abomination from the comics. That was disappointing. But honestly, one of the great action finishes for a superhero film. And also, we got like I said before, we got the Bruce Banner that we really needed in the MCU, but it didn't last for long. As we see in this picture here, this was a take on the Bill Bixby, David Banner, where he's on the run. He's trying to hide from the police. Unfortunately, we'll never get another film like this because I don't know if it's Marvel so much as Disney doesn't want to share the rights with Universal for the distribution of the film. And that's why we're never going to get another solo Hulk film. Unfortunately, they got the rights to Spider-Man. I mean, they did a deal with Sony to get the rights to Spider-Man, but unfortunately, they don't feel that the Incredible Hulk is as important a character to them where they need to make a deal to pay off the distribution rights to Universal. But anyway, again, the cast is perfect. William Hurt as General Ross makes you forget all about Sam Elliott because Sam Elliott was a pretty, one of the few points in that film's favor, Ang Lee's Hulk, was the cast, predominantly Sam Elliott, but William Hurt, I think, exceeded the role of General Ross. Of course, he came back as Secretary of Defense Ross in Civil War. Just great action all around. You have Blonsky, played by that other great actor that I can't remember his name, but Liv Tyler as Betty, one of my favorite characters in all of comicdom, Betty Ross. You know, again, they wasted so much potential with the Hulk franchise. They didn't follow up on it. They didn't give us Talbot and Betty. They put Talbot on Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. Very disappointing that they never really gave us the leader, as he was realized so well in this film. The birth of the leader was going to, it was hinted at and it was going to be made in the sequel. That never happened. Very disappointing and depressing every time I think about what could have been, especially if Norton stayed on with the character. But we'll always have this film to remind us what could have been. Number 5, The Incredible Hulk. All right, we are down now to number 4. And number 4, another one of my favorite characters, and he was given, finally, the origin he deserved after several films in Christopher Nolan's Batman Begins, the first Batman film to truly explore the origins of Batman, show us his rise, and not to be confused with The Dark Knight Rises, which definitely did not make this list. Look at the costume, looks great. And Christian Bale, of course, just phenomenal in this role. I loved his performance as Bruce Wayne. I loved his performance as Batman. This is before the Bat voice became ridiculed and so forth. Just terrific. I mean, like I said before, this is what Batman's all about, Charlie Brown. You watch this film, you understand Batman, you know what he's all about, you know why he does what he does, you know how he does what he does. Great performances, again, all around, from Michael Caine. You had Morgan Freeman. You had, of course, Liam Neeson as Ra's al Ghul, Ken Watanabe as the fake Ra's al Ghul. Who else? Rutger Hauer. Just a phenomenal list. Katie Holmes, of course, does her part very well. I thought she was great in this. And you get to see where Batman came from, and tragedy, the triumph as he is training, the making of the gadgets, the adopting the persona. This is pitch perfect storytelling for an origin. Bang, bang, bang. Christopher Nolan puts it all out there, and it's just perfect. And as I said before, I think that one scene I would have preferred that they would have elaborated on was Batman forsaking the use of guns. We get that brief scene where he throws the firearm out into the river. And I think they should have lingered on that more, because a lot of Batman's mythos is predicated on the fact that he will not use a firearm, but we still keep coming back to that in all the films over and over again. It's very disappointing that they can't seem to make that point stick. Of course, also, yeah, I mean, we can't forget Commissioner Gordon. Of course, a great performance there, of course, by him. And yeah, just a great movie all around. And it's one of the all-time great origin films. I love the ending where Gordon says to him, and it feels like it's straight from the comics, "I never said thanks." Batman says, "And you'll never have to." And, the lead into the Joker, I'll look into it. Also, great performance there by Cillian Murphy, I believe is his name. I can't remember the Commissioner Gordon actor's name right now, but I can remember Cillian Murphy. But yeah, as the Scarecrow, I think he did a great job here as well. And I can't see Batman's origin being related any better than this film. This is the film I waited for. I waited through the 80s, the 90s for the perfect Batman film. And thankfully, Christopher Nolan finally came around to making this film for me in 2005. And it's a masterpiece. The top 5 of all time, my favorite superhero films. As I said before, the reason also why this is above The Dark Knight is because this feels like a Batman movie with crime film trappings. And The Dark Knight feels like a crime film with Batman movie trappings. I prefer it this way, where the Batman is more prominent in the proceedings. But anyhow, yeah, great performances, great action. This was just top of the list. Number 4, Batman Begins. Okay, number 3, we're getting into the top 3 now. What are we going to do? What are we going to see here for the top 3? All right, number 3, we have Spider-Man, the original Spider-Man movie with Sam Raimi directing. Tobey Maguire, perfect, pitch perfect as Peter Parker. He's just got that nobility and humility and just good-natured, you know, persona about him where he feels like Peter Parker. He doesn't feel like an uptight jerk like, Andrew Garfield's Peter Parker. He don't feel like some zany neurotic like Tom Holland's Spider-Man. He feels like an honest to goodness kid next door that just got, you know, sort of the winds of fate turning, the cards in his favor. And it's his blessing and his curse, as we learn from the film, the narration, which I thought was also a nice touch. Again, I could go over it all again. A great cast, Cliff Robertson as Uncle Ben, the only film that really focuses strongly and hardly on that message. With great power comes great responsibility. So important to to the Spider-Man origin. And, it's nowhere to be found in Homecoming. It's very diluted and watered down in The Amazing Spider-Man. This is the message that a Spider-Man movie needs. And it's done so well here. It's perfect. Norman Osborn being the villain, the Green Goblin. As I said before, the costume was not that bad. Kind of a letdown compared to what they could have done with it. But it's not that bad. It was lampooned. That's the reason why we didn't have a good Green Goblin costume for the sequels for Harry. But yeah, Willem Dafoe, just great performance there as the bizarre Norman Osborn with his strangely dual persona. We got J.K. Simmons, perfect as J. Jonah Jameson in the role of his career. I don't think anybody will ever forget him playing J. Jonah Jameson, no matter what else he does. And he's done great things as well. He's in 4 movies on my list, 3 as J. Jonah Jameson and 1 as Commissioner Gordon. So, he's in the Hall of Fame here. Kristen Dunst, perfect as Mary Jane. I think in this film, she's probably the most Mary Jane-ish of the films. She feels to me like she stepped out of the comic in this film. It really felt like the comic accurate Mary Jane. Again, James Franco was perfect. Rosemary Harris, she doesn't get enough. She's the patron saint of these films. These films would not be worth a darn without Rosemary Harris's Aunt May. She portrayed Aunt May pitch perfect from the comics as well. Again, it's one of my desert island movies. I'd have to have Spider-Man with me. It's a little dark. If anything, I would say maybe this is a little dark, this film, to want to watch it over and over again. But, I mean, because we basically have the heartbreak of Uncle Ben's death. You have Aunt May threatened. You have Mary Jane threatened multiple times. But, it's still that parade, the Unity Parade or whatever that is, that scene, it's, again, one of the all-time great scenes in superhero cinema. You just focus on the greatness of a superhero and supervillain just duking out and going at each other in the public square. It's just great. And I lament that we didn't get more films in the Raimi series. They could have easily done 6, which I believe was their plan originally. Unfortunately, it was not to be, but we still got this, the definitive Spider-Man film. Number 3 on my all-time list. All right, you gotta imagine what the top 2 are, right? What order will they be in? I don't know, but we've been noticeably absent from one gentleman. Number 2 on my list, Christopher Reeve's Superman. Yes, this is it, the one that started it all. This is the film that all films aspire to be, the original Donner Superman. Now, this is number 2 on my list. It could very easily be number 1 because I see Superman's 1 and 2 as one movie. But honestly, if I'm going to have to pick favorites, I'm going to have to go with 2 over 1. 1, though, is the perfect origin, perfectly laid out. We get the 3 acts. We get Krypton, wonderful performances by Marlon Brando, Terrence Stamp, the tragic, sending of the son of Jor-El off the planet before they blow up and die, and the whole civilization comes to an end. And the humble beginnings under the parentage of Ma and Pa Kent, of course, with great performances there as well. Glenn Ford and Phyllis Thaxter, I believe her name was. Great performances by them. Then, of course, you have the, in the middle America feeling. Then you have the comic book portion. Again, Gene Hackman, the perfect Lex Luthor. I don't care what you say. He's one of my all-time favorite villains. He's just dedicatedly and diabolically evil. And he does it with a glint and a glimmer in his eye and a smile on his lips, but he means business. He's willing to kill basically an entire state. Let that sink in. Again, supporting characters, Ned Beatty's Otis and Valerie Perrine as Miss Tessmacher. Miss Tessmacher! And they were great. You also have, of course, the supporting cast. Margot Kidder. Come on. There was never going to be a better Lois Lane than Margot Kidder. I think she just nailed that perfectly. She had that adoration of Superman down that no other actress has been entirely able to emulate. I think, to her credit, Amy Adams has come close. She's come close because you can tell she's a student of these films. She really wants her Lois Lane to be the modern day Margot Kidder. But, they really, set the mold with Margot Kidder. This performance was hers that, all to follow would want to emulate. Mark McClure as Jimmy Olsen, Jackie Cooper as Perry White. What can I say? And Christopher Reeve. Christopher Reeve embodied Superman in a way that no one else has before or since. And again, this is to take nothing away from any actors. I think Henry Cavill has as good a chance of any as being remembered as a great Superman. It's not his fault. He got stuck in 2 bad Superman movies. And in Justice League, he finally came out of his shell to be, a better than average Superman. Should they give him a Man of Steel 2, which I hope he gets, he will do great. He will do great things. But as of now, there is not even a rival for the throne of Superman. Christopher Reeve was, and for the foreseeable future will be the definitive Man of Steel. And so that is my number 2 film in the pantheon of my all-time favorite superhero films. There is Superman. Okay. All right, next up we have the final one. We got I don't know if you can hear a musical interlude here to sign off the final, and I already, blew it, so the drum roll really doesn't help, but the final film in my top 20, the number 1 film of all time, my all-time favorite superhero film that will probably never be dethroned. Second part of the great Superman saga, Superman 2. How can you not love this movie? General Zod, the baddest of the bad. You got Lex Luthor scheming as always to try to use Zod and his cronies to his, to his effect, to his betterment. Great performances there by Sarah Douglas, Jack O'Halloran as the supporting, villains to Zod, Terrence Stamp. Of course, Terrence Stamp blows them all away. They haven't done a great General Zod since then because, like everyone in the Donner films, in these original 2 Donner films, you can't improve upon what they have done. You can't improve upon the performances given here, really. Margot Kidder, again, heartbreaking with her performance here in this film. She just is the heart and soul of this film. And the way she cries with just reckless abandon, so to speak, it's just it's heart-tearing. It gets to me every time when I see this scene. And of course, Christopher Reeve, the journey of Superman in this film. Again, I don't want to put too much on it. Which is better, the Lester version, the theatrical cut, or the director's cut, the Donner version? I think the best version of this film lies somewhere in between. I think if I was to, have to make a choice, I would say the ABC cut of the film that was shown on television, which was the version I grew up with when I was a kid. which basically has more Donner footage in it, but with the omission of Marlon Brando. So what I would do is I would put the Marlon Brando scenes in for the Lara scenes, but apart from that, just keep the theatrical version from the ABC with the Donner scenes. But you got the great hero's journey here, Superman's arc. He finally feels that he has done all he has had to do for the world. Uh, he's defeated Lex Luthor. He's saved the world from a nuclear disaster that would have destroyed California. What else is there for him to do? Well, he's going to settle down now with Lois. And love is truly his kryptonite here. Love is what brings the Man of Steel low and lays him down and takes his powers away from him, because he cannot serve both a mortal and, mankind. And that's a great message there, because it shows that something that I've always approved of in superhero lore, so to speak, is superheroes don't kill, and superheroes prize the secret identity more than anything else. And the dangers brought to those they love by showing others who their, true self is. It's so easy to say, I am Iron Man, but then again, you have to deal with that when they come bomb your house, like in Iron Man 3. Craziness. So, it's the concepts are mutually exclusive. So he decides he's done all he has to do, and he doesn't take it as a selfish act at all. He just thinks that he deserves to be happy. And who would blame him for that? Everybody wants to be happy and, live a normal life. But his is a higher happiness, as Jor-El says. And later on, when he's confronted by the bully in the diner, which is one of the all-time great scenes as well, Pepper Martin just played the heck out of that scene. And you could see the change brought about in Superman merely by him being made mortal. By being made mortal, he's already like getting into fights and cursing. Well, he says damn, it's not really a curse, but he's made human, and it's made all too clear that he divested of himself that which made him special. And it's a very interesting concept. I always say that in this film, Kal-El becomes a born-again Kryptonian, because basically that's what happens. He has to come back after trying to do it his way and trying to, you can't please, both God and money, as the Bible says. You can't please, yourself and God, so to speak, in this analogy. He can't just have the life he wants. There are repercussions to that. And because of his act of quote unquote selfishness, the world is left unprotected. When Zod, who again, of course, is a Satan figure, is, dominating the earth and subjecting the earth. And it's just a great performance by Reeve. I mean, he comes crawling back, crying, Father. And like many of us know who are born again Christians, that's what you have to do. That's how you become right with God. And that's how, Kal-El becomes right again with his father, because his father, of course, Jor-El playing God in this analogy, has already foreseen that, the bond will break and he'll need that bond, to the divine reestablished. So to get his divinity back, a divinity that was given to him, a divinity that he was not born with, remember. Superman was only mortal on Krypton. Kal-El was only mortal on Krypton. But coming to Earth, he was sent by Jor-El for that purpose, to be quote-unquote divine. And, of course, he must come back now to the Father, who uses the green crystal, which is the link of communication to them, which is symbolic of the evergreen. Like the Christmas tree, the evergreen is a symbol of life. And this life is something that Jor-El, of course, planned for, that he would need this bond restored. Just a beautiful story all around. And of course, you know, there's the sacrifice that Jor-El performs to give back his powers to Kal-El, which is also something that's, mirrored in Christianity as well, with Christ taking our sins upon himself and dying on the cross. Again, it's very heavy themes here that you don't really necessarily need to see if you don't look into it. But they're all there. It's very enjoyable to be able to see them, these themes portrayed for what they are. Of course, there's a great sense of action, a great sense of romance. The end of the film is, of course, one of the great build-ups of all time, gets paid off. Zod is just wreaking havoc throughout the world, throughout the country, at least, of America. And Superman, of course, is blissfully unaware as he's having this love affair with Lois. And then the action comes in when he comes to confront Zod. Of course, the great scene, General, would you care to step outside? Just awesome scene. Then, of course, you have the great battle in the Fortress of Solitude, as we see here. And the great, tactical plan of Superman to bring them to the fortress, to have the fortress depower them so they could be easily defeated. As we see here, this is another one of my all-time favorite scenes, Superman defeating Zod in the fortress. There's the question of how come Superman kills Zod. One of the all-time great scenes here where he crushes his hand, but he still appears to kill him. Again, this is something that is because of the tragic firing of Donner. It has never been made clear what happens here. I, as a kid, always took it that Zod was sent down to a dungeon when he was thrown across the room into like some smoky pit. Because later on, when you see in the deleted scenes, as well as in the ABC version that I grew up on, Zod and company are carded by the Arctic Police. Now, Donner, of course, was fired before he got a chance to complete these scenes. So we don't have any close-ups of Zod and company being carted away. It's just in a faraway shot while Superman's talking to Luthor, who's trying to get off the hook by fast-talking him, which is also a funny scene. But so originally the intent was not for Zod to die, nor the Kryptonian trio at all to die. But of course, because the Salkinds were, I want to be polite and just say jerks, they fired Donner before he could finish his filming. Lester was brought in, and he did substantive rewrites on some of it. The structure was basically the same. If you've seen both versions of the film, it's basically the same film with just some, some little subtle tweakings. But in that film, of course, Superman does appear to throw them into an abyss, or Zod into an abyss, and Lois knocks Ursa into an abyss. Like I said, I think it's up to the viewer's interpretation. Was it a dungeon? Was it that they were going to be put into jail later? Or is it just that Superman, because he's a Kryptonian and Zod is a Kryptonian, that because he is the son of Jor-El, he has every right to play judge, jury, and executioner to a Kryptonian, since his father was Zod's jailer. And of course, in this analogy, we've got Zod as Satan and Jor-El as God. Does that make Superman Jesus in this analogy, where he has the rights being co-equal with Jor-El? It's a very interesting thing to study and contemplate. And, I love this film so much for all those layers and all those levels you can watch it on. And for me, it will always be my all-time favorite superhero film. So once again, I'll let you run over the list quickly. As of now, anyway, things can change. I could probably tweak the list a little bit, especially the bottom 10. But, and we haven't seen Infinity War yet, which will be out pretty soon. But number 20, Spider-Man 2. Number 19, Spider-Man 3. Number 18, Batman Forever. Number 17, X-Men Days of Future Past. Number 16, Wonder Woman. Number 15, X-Men. Number 14, The Dark Knight. Number 13, Fantastic Four. That, of course, is the Tim Story version. Number 12, Justice League. Number 11, Civil War. Captain America Civil War. Number 10, Daredevil. Number 9, X-Men 2, X-Men United. Number 8, Thor. Number 7, Captain America, the First Avenger. Number 6, The Avengers. Number 5, The Incredible Hulk. Number 4, Batman Begins. Number 3, Spider-Man. Number 2, Superman. And number 1, Superman 2. So thank you for joining me. Well, we took about an hour and a half, thereabouts, a little over an hour and a half. So it didn't quite get as long-winded as I thought. I kind of gave short shrift to a couple of them. I know Wonder Woman and Thor, I think particularly I didn't have a lot to say about. Maybe Captain America, First Avenger as well. But I've got other videos where we've talked about them, so you can seek them out in other ranking videos. Be sure you let me know in the comments below what you thought of the list and some of my reviews of the films and what your top 20 list looks like, or top 10 or top 5. Let me know in the comments below what you think for your favorite superhero films of all time. All right, once again, thank you for joining us, and we'll be doing our regular broadcasts probably on Saturday. Make sure you check that out. We'll see if we can do one on Wednesday. Since I'm doing one today, I don't know if I'm going to do a Wednesday broadcast, but stay tuned. Until next we meet, this is Johnny Torch reminding you once again, keep the flame burning brightly, and I'll be with you again real soon.